People don't learn from other people's experience. And you can see that all around in Miami. We are surrounded, literally surrounded by people who have come to this city, this county, from places like Cuba, like Venezuela, like Colombia, like Nicaragua. And they tell their stories, and they tell about these governments that are oppressive, these regimes, really. And yet, people will still vote for the same thing. So I wish I had an answer. That's the bottom line, is why don't people listen? And I think the real issue is that it's the same thing I witnessed in Venezuela when Chavez was coming into power. You know, people would say, it can't happen here. It can't happen here. And I saw the same thing here in Miami. Well, that's fine that we are now increasing our budget $1 billion for this city or this county. It doesn't matter that you're going to raise our taxes, that you're going to do these things, because that can't happen here. And I think that's the point, is that we as a society believe that everything is going to be okay and everything's going to stay the same, and then one day it's not. But at that point, as we've experienced, Cuba now has 63 years that they have not voted for anyone. And before that, that's probably a bad example anyways, because before that they had a dictator in Batista. But once you're in that position, you can't vote your way out. The only way out of an oppressive regime is fighting your way out.
That's right.
And so when it's at that point, it's too late.
You know, you're so right with what you said about Venezuela and people saying it can happen here. But now people say the same thing in the United States.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I'm a believer in American exceptionalism, but American exceptionalism doesn't mean that we're immune from problems. It means that we're exceptional because we're free. That doesn't mean that we're going to be free forever. We're only going to be free if we keep those freedoms. And I was in my university library a few months ago, and I was looking for books about Venezuela in New York. And I found a book that was titled Venezuela Land of Opportunity from 1953. And you know, they talked about the economy and all these things that were like in Venezuela. And that was the time that my grandparents immigrated to Venezuela from Europe. And they listed the salaries of different professions, the average salaries of different professions in Caracas in US dollars. And I wonder, how much did those professions pay in the 1950s in the United States? So I went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. I looked up one of them was like secretary. A secretary made more money adjusted to US dollars in Caracas than in the United States. There were more cars per capita in Caracas, the capital of Venezuela, than in New York City in the 1950s. That's how rich Venezuela was. Now, of course, the United States was much poorer in the 50s than it is today, but the point is the relative wealth. And so if it can happen in Venezuela, a country that was democratic, that was wealthy by international standards, that had political freedom, then why can't it happen here? It can happen anywhere. And you know, Jorge's question was about communication. How can we communicate it? I want to bring up, it's not just about communication, it's about culture. And why do I want to bring up culture? Because socialism, at least my experience has told me, really comes from envy. And in Latin America, there is an epidemic of envy. There is an epidemic of hate towards success, while in America, we admire success.
I think that's changing, though. When I saw people wheeling a gulag, for example, Jeff Bezos for Amazon, you know that it's changed. It's changed.
You know, maybe, I think we've always had sectors here. You know, we've had, for over 100 years, we tried to have an actual socialist party in the United States. And we had, you know, a big communist movement, and you know, there's also people who don't believe in free markets on the right, too. But I think that the average American here believes much more in entrepreneurship and success and risk-taking than I think the average Latin American in my experience, at least in Venezuela. And I think that that's something that we need to preserve and we need to try to export. And that we can do it here, you know. We can do it without government action exporting entrepreneurship into Latin America. I think there should be more Americans trying to bring those things into Latin America. There should be more of an effort to try to help people in that way.